Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all the participants who have joined us across the globe today to attend the ISO UNIDO joint webinar on conformity assessment and accreditation activities in a virtual world. This is the third webinar we are running within the ISO UNIDO special webinar series under the theme of counteracting the impact of COVID-19 through the use of international standards. My name is Nisreen, and I'm working at the ISO Central Secretariat as part of the capacity building team. And I'm very pleased today to welcome you to our webinar. And just to, we now, all of us, we know that we are facing very challenging time, and it's quite obvious that the conformity assessment and accreditation activity has been seriously affected at different levels due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 and also the subsequent travel restrictions that a lot of the governments are imposing across the world. And hence the conformity assessment body and the national accreditation body also are now being enforced or forced to cancel or to postpone some of their on-site activities, and they have to face the situation of only being able to provide their services as with their workforce or their employee in a most remotely manner. And this is why what was hardly acceptable yesterday, it's almost now become the normal of our today life. So in today's webinar, the format of the webinar we'll have a panel discussions among 3 panelists, specialists in the conformity assessment area, and will be moderated by a qualified expert from a regional accreditation body to facilitate the discussions and also the Q&A sessions among the participants. So let's start just to give you a quick overview on the agenda, our agenda for today. What are the topics that we are going to cover? So as you can see, the webinar, the total timeline is 1.5 hours. We will start by setting the scene, and this is going to be handled by our moderator. Then we will have 3 different sessions addressing different aspects of related to the theme of today. The first session, it will address the remote activity in a conformity assessment context, the framework and concept. The second session will talk about the condition and limitations of this remote activity. And the third one will be dedicated to the accreditation activity in a virtual world. And then this will be followed by a Q&A sessions. And at the end, we will have a quick wrap up of what we have been discussed through this webinar. So I hope that this is part of your expectations for today. And now, please just allow me to give you a few housekeeping information related to your participation in this event. First, the webinar is going to be recorded, and we are going to make the recording and the speaker presentations available directly after the event. Please note that once you leave the webinar, you will receive a message, automatic notification, ask you to fill a short questionnaire. And we'll highly appreciate if you can fill it. It will take only a few minutes of your time, but this is to see your feedback and how we can improve our future activity. Also, you can see at the bottom of your screen, you have a box called Q&A. And please try to type your questions, and we are going to answer as much as we can during once we finish with the presentations by the panelists. So having said that, and I'm now going to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Brahim Al-Hawla, who will help us thankfully to moderate and facilitate the discussions today. So, okay, our moderator today, Mr. Brahim, he's an industrial engineer with a master's degree in production system management, and he has conducted many researches in the field of renewable energy in Tunisia. He's an accreditation service manager of the GCC Accreditation Center in Saudi Arabia that serves the 6 GCC countries, including Yemen. And he's highly active at the regional and international level in relation to accreditation. Since 2018, he's holding many positions related to accreditation. He's currently a member of the IAF Task Force for Rapid Response for COVID-19. He's a chair of the IAF Communication and Marketing Committee. He is a chair of the APAC Capacity Building Committee. He's a chair also of the Arab Communication and Marketing Committee, and he's currently also acting as a working group convener for the inspection committee, I like P15. And as well, he's specialized in the quality infrastructure and accreditation area. So having said that, I would like now to pass the floor to Brahim to say a few words, and then we will also would like to get some information about from where you are coming, in which sectors you are currently working, and we are going to do this through a few polling questions just to start warm up, and then we will go directly to our panelists. So Brahim, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nisreen. I'm very happy to be moderator for this very interesting webinar in the virtual world. And it is very interesting that we'll talk about virtual work and also using virtual tools. So this is very interesting for all the stakeholders in conformity assessment, accreditation, and the quality infrastructure in general. So as you know, everyone, since this COVID-19 happened, we have been restricted to not being able to travel, not being able to go to office. So many people have been working from home. And accreditation and conformity assessment is not an exclusion for this. So we also, as in accreditation bodies, the different conformity assessment bodies, laboratories, inspection bodies, certifiers, PTP providers, and certified reference materials, verification and validation bodies, all these conformity assessment bodies and others, they had to adapt, and to very fast and a very quick lapse of time, they had to go and use these new tools and also change the way they deliver their activities. So today we're going to try to give you some information about this, share with you some of experiences with very renowned experts in this field from accreditation and conformity assessment. And we will go through different phases for this. So we start with Pedro for this activity. Pedro is covering mostly the certification associations and certification work. We also have another aspect about the challenges and limitations of such work, like virtual work and virtual conformity assessment. And as I see in many of these questions that you have already put in the Q&A, that you're wondering, is it legal, is it possible, is it effective or not? So we'll see with Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie, about this work and what's its limitations and challenges. And also we'll see the part related to accreditation bodies who are supervising all this work of conformity assessment and making sure that the results are still acceptable around the world, with Lena Podat, also our expert in this field, where she works for many years now for accreditation bodies and also for conformity assessment. So we would like to start first by a poll to know you, our participants from the Zoom, but also other participants online from Facebook and others. And the first question would be to know where you come from. So how do you categorize yourself? Are you a regulator, scheme owner? Are you an industry or user? Are you a conformity assessment body? Are you from an accreditation body? Are you an international organization or other? So we will give you around 30 seconds to respond to this. So click it and then submit. Okay, some seconds coming. Very good. So if we can see the results, very good. Oh, so we have many accreditation bodies today here. So the community of accreditation bodies are very interested to be in here. We have also, as expected, conformity assessment bodies. Very happy to see almost 10% of regulators. This is very important for us because that's something that supports accreditation. And if regulators are not happy with us to make remote, that would be a problem for us. So that's very important. International organizations, that's good and expected the number. And also we have other people interested in conformity systems. Very good. Okay, so we go to the next question, which is about your opinions. Before we make this webinar, we would like to know your opinion. Is remote activity is something good option that we should continue? This is very nice. Or is it useful, but only for this period? So, okay, let's use it now and then in the future we will see. Or you say, no, that's not nice. It's like not a good way forward to prove competence and compliance to requirements. It's not a nice way to use it. It never can be like on site, and let's not use it. So it's up to you to see, depending on your experience, background, your field of work, which one of these three you think is better. Okay, we'll give you some seconds, maybe 20 more seconds. Very good. Let's see the results. Yes, very good. So this is now shows that most of the people are good with this, and that we should go forward with the remote activities in the future. Some also say that's useful for this event. So we have like split, like almost same people say it's very useful for this period, but after that we have maybe to go back to on-site or maybe mix between them. And very few say it's not good. So I think this shows very well the impression about the remote, and hopefully we can clarify in this meeting about that. The third and last question will be rating the response from the quality infrastructure parties. So I would like to see, like in this period, we had accreditation bodies react, make measures, we had conformity bodies adapt and make measures, regulators. So how do you think that the measures taken by the quality infrastructure response to COVID-19, how was it? Was it like a very good, considering the global nature of the outbreak? So so it's like a global thing, but then they did their best. Is it like reasonable? Okay, they did it, they could have done better, but it needs stronger and faster in the future to do such a response? Or do you think it was not at the level of expectation of such quality infrastructure stakeholders? So what's your opinion about the response from the quality infrastructure to the fight against the COVID-19? I'll give you some seconds for it, so maybe 10, 15 seconds. Okay. Very good. Very good, as expected. So most of the members say, and the participants say that it's reasonable. It could have been better, but it's reasonable that what have been done. It's not that very good. Maybe some of the participants in quality infrastructure did respond faster than others, but still this pandemic was too strong and too fast and too prompt to allow for such a response. So I think this is very good answer. Thank you very much, everyone, for this answer. And we'll start now with the first part, and hopefully this will confirm your understanding. Yes, Ms. Reem?
Please, just to mention to the participants that we are making live streaming on Facebook. So I put the link on the chat box. So if you know that somebody has not able to join me through the Zoom platform, because already I can see we have reached 506 participants. So please pass this information to your colleague. Thank you. Brahim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So if someone is still trying to get in, and because we are full room today, full house, so you can just give them the link for ARAC official Facebook channel, and then it's already streaming there. Thank you very much. We start with Pedro. Pedro is a renowned expert in conformity assessment, especially in certification world. So he's a chemical engineer from Porto University from Barcelona. He has 25 years of experience internationally in conformity assessment related activities, diverse ones, consulting, teaching, training, certification, inspection also, and surely also in international accreditation corporations work, as he is now the quality manager of IAF, the International Accreditation Forum. He is also the CEO and CEO of INETQI Ltd, which is the consultative body, but also he's the managing director of the network IQNet Association for certification bodies. So he represents IQNet. We see him in many events. He represents an IAF technical committee when he discusses about very technical things in IAF for conformity assessment and CABs. Also from at the European level, so he works with European accreditation, and he's in the certification committee for EA. Also with Inter-Americans Accreditation Corporation, so he's in part of the stakeholder committee of Inter-Americans Accreditation Corporation for the Americas. Also at the standardization level, he's participating to the ISO Casco Star meetings, and he's also chairman of the policy and coordination group. And also he attends a lot of those meetings, working groups of ISO and Casco. So he's very, very active, and he's also knowledgeable about what's happening and the very new challenges that are happening for conformity assessment. So certainly we have here someone with very deep experience. We will start with him for the first session to talk to us about the remote activities in conformity assessment context. So a framework and concept, how is this working together? We have many accreditation bodies here, but also we have many other regulators participating with us today, and it would be interesting to set the general framework and how this is working during the COVID-19. So Pedro, please.
Thank you, Brahim. Thank you. It's really, I'm delighted to have received the invitation to participate in this webinar, and thank you so much. And it's a pleasure and an honor to address all of you. I've seen from the chat that we have participants from all corners of the world, from Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, to Europe, and to Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines. So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it may be applicable in your case. I will try to share my screen, but I would ask Nerine to allow me to share the screen, please. I'm still blocked.
Yeah, 1 second, Pedro.
Thank you. It's surely my fault because I had to go out and come back again, and the configuration was lost. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nerine. Thank you. Let me pick it up. Okay, and now I hope you can all see it.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm just adjusting my screen. Fantastic. So as I'm the first speaker, and like Brahim said, I believe it's my task to focus also on the basic. And I'm trying to move my, yeah, no, it's okay. To focus on the basic, I was saying. Although from the poll, I expect most of the participants to have a sound knowledge in conformity assessment. So I will be brief anyway. The strength of delivery by the CABs, by the conformity assessment bodies, comes from the interdependency of three fundamental pillars in conformity assessment: standards, applicable requirements, for instance, from Casco or from scheme owners, conformity assessment itself, a third-party assessment of compliance, and CAB competence, impartiality, integrity assessment provided by accreditation bodies. The three independent groups act to provide assurance that the stakeholders deliver what is expected as it is expected. Surely there's no need to go deeply into definitions, but I wanted to bring this to couple of statements, just a couple of statements, because I think it's important for framing my presentation. The first one is from ISO Casco, stating that conformance assessment is a demonstration that specified requirements are fulfilled, and demonstrating the fulfillment of specified requirements by bodies who are competent, consistent, and impartial have a proven ability to reduce uncertainty and risk. And these are surely very important aspects in the challenging times we are all living in. The second statement is from ISO IEC 17011. It lists all types of different conformity assessment. And I bring this just to point out that most of the content of my presentation is focused and based on my experience in the fields of certification and inspection. Yeah, I've stolen this slide from a CAB Association presentation on raising the bar for food safety certification during a meeting we held with industry drivers some months ago. Through it, I try to make it clear that the assurance pillars of conformity assessment that I mentioned before, standards, conformity assessment, and accreditation, are in fact a continuous system of checks and balances. ABs are guided by standards and they are managed by peer assessment evaluation. CBs are again guided by standards, judged by the ABs, and they are managed using a whole range of control mechanisms, including peer assessment as well. And then we have many other interested parties like regulators, like CB associations, as IQNet, or scheme owners that are guided also by standards but managed by specific requirements. All of this feed into the global infrastructure system, giving the key stakeholders the trust they need. I've been attending and participating in several webinars over the past months, on subjects related to the use of ICT and remote auditing activities, especially within the framework of the 3 pillars I mentioned before. And so what I did was to collect some hot issues or some statements as they were presented in those different forums. I will try to detail some of them later, but for now, let us focus on the conveyed message. Remote audit activities are not a breaking news alert. ABs and CABs are using ICT to conduct remote activities for more than a decade now. There are comprehensive guidelines and criteria available, standards, accreditation documents, criteria to conduct such remote activities, and are also available for a long time. The remote activities flow and main processes are similar in nature to the traditional approach, but some steps gain increased importance and relevance, such as preparation and planning and risk assessment. The remote activities are clearly needed. And again, we've been using it for different reasons. For instance, we use in the cab industry, we use remote activities to promote efficient access to remote locations or remote offices. When travel restrictions apply, for instance, to security issues, we also rely on remote activities. And also, just to give another example, when we want to accommodate specific expertise in the audit team, and to be more efficient in terms of cost. For example, for a specific project, we have to audit or assess a product or specific process. And this was clearly pushed by the sense of urgency imposed by the pandemic outbreak, although it was already here. And also, this also promoted a unique and introduced a unique cooperation momentum between different stakeholders. We'll have the opportunity to talk about this as well. Again, a comprehensive set of publicly available documentation can be noticed. There are CASCO standards applicable to conformity assessment, obviously, that establish requirements for CABs and for ABs, like the ISO IEC 17011 or the ISO IEC 17021-1 or the ISO IEC 17065 and many others. And ISO also published now for almost 10 years now, the ISO 19011 establishing the guidance for auditing management systems. So the dispositions for remote audits are already in there for more than a decade, for almost a decade. And then we have accreditation documents like informative documents or mandatory documents that are publicly available from the IAF website, and actually constitute a basic framework for remote activities, auditing activities. To illustrate the needs and expectations from the different stakeholders, I decided to use a couple of relevant references that I took from webinars like this in the past. The first one is from Laurie Gillespie from NAAB, and Laurie clearly states that outcome matters. It doesn't, independently on the way you do it and how you do it, the integrity and the credibility of conformity assessment shall be maintained. But we have to be aware of the shift in paradigms regarding remote activities. We have to continuously learn. That's something we will listen and we will be aware surely during this webinar. We have to build confidence on remote activities amongst all the interested parties, from the auditors to the users, to the organizations, to the accreditation bodies, to the regulators, like Rahim said. We have to fit for purpose. Remote activities do not apply to all types of conformity assessment in the same way. Maybe for management system certification is a little bit more straightforward, but perhaps for product certification, we need maybe a hybrid approach, combining remote and on-site could be applied. And for other types of conformity assessment, maybe it's not applicable at all. And within each type of conformity assessment, one size does not fit at all. We have to evaluate the application and the implementation of remote activities through risk assessment, depending on the scheme, depending on the nature of the service, depending on the clients and the organization. So one size does not fit at all. The second reference I bring is from my dear friend Sharonda Jeffries. Sharonda has been promoting debate on remote activities for quite a long time. She works for Cisco, but she was appointed for relevant important positions in TIA, Telecommunications Industry Association, and also in IAF. She's actually the chair of the UAC, the Users Advisory Committee of IAF. And Sharonda has this interesting question. How can you balance the risk of not doing an audit compared to the risk of doing an audit using ICT? And I'm not detailing on every aspect, but just that auditing using ICT allows some level of oversight, promoting ongoing integrity. However, if the competence and familiarity with ICT is not assured, auditors can be ineffective, and unethical or even fraudulent behavior can be noticed. On the other side, not auditing obviously allows organizations to operate without any disruption, but again, it can promote fraud and eventually liability if we just extend the validity of certificates without any kind of oversight activity, for instance. One thing I'm sure, in terms of remote auditing, we should not let different stakeholders introduce ambiguity and confusion by using different tones of voice and criteria. Conformity assessment, remote auditing, or remote activities should not be this type of a beast. And this is why international cooperation is also a clear cornerstone. I do apologize for the crowded slides. This is totally against my nature, and it's not usual in me. But I just wanted to include as much information as possible, so that in the limited time that I have, so that just in case you'd like to use it or address it later. And the current challenging pandemic context really pushes us forward in terms of cooperation initiatives. Not that they didn't exist before, obviously. I can just refer IF FAQ project. It was very fast, they were very fast, IF was very fast in putting this up, and it's very comprehensive. In fact, many of the questions I've seen in the Q&A area can actually be clearly addressed by IF FAQ questions and answers. We have the Casco statement on COVID-19, and Stephanie has a very important role in Casco, and she was one of the main responsibles for this, coming up with a clear message on remote activities as a reliable tool during this pandemic moment, and not just during this pandemic context. We have ISO APG guidance on remote audits, a tremendously good white paper on the roles and the dispositions for remote auditing by this ISO group. We have industry drivers working together with accreditation, with certification, with regulators, with retailers, with manufacturers, with the organizations, with the users, to actually achieve consensus on the scope and the use of remote activities in different industries, like for instance in food safety through GFSI, or in the automotive through IATF, or in the IF through the UAC that I mentioned. okay, with different levels of success, I have to say. In the food industry, GFSI just came out with a new set of benchmarking requirements addressing remote activities. In the automotive area, there was no significant development in this area until now, but we could give other examples like the medical devices and other. And then within the CAB community, either on a one-to-one basis or through CABAC, which is the Conformity Assessment Body's advisory committee of IAF, we really managed to cooperate by the minute in making proposals, engaging with stakeholders, producing inquiries and analysis, and providing arguments. Outside the basic framework of conformity assessment, how did international organizations, when supporting and promoting, for instance, global quality infrastructure, human health, trade, environment, how did they embrace activities? And this is our perception. We have some examples there, and it appears that they were quite successful in adapting to the new normal and to overcome the challenges of the current context to continue with their core activities. And the moment is now to develop rules of procedure, and many of these organizations already realize that. They also realize that after the pandemic, there will be probably other situations that will create constraints in physical meetings, for instance, or in making physical decision-making in the decision-making process. So they are already addressing those issues, and through lessons learned, they are developing relevant best practice that will be invaluable to advance in the direction in the shifting to remote activities in the future. This is my last slide. I tried to summarize all the main arguments and open the way for the next presenters. Remote activities can place organizations in a position to resume business with accreditation and certification intact. The genie is definitely out of the bottle, and many will not want to go back to what was it before. We have to be clear also that remote activities aim to complement, not to replace traditional on-site activities. And surely changes will have to be done. Surely ICT will not always provide a solution. Again, remote activities should be fit for purpose, and the benefits, the concerns, the conditions, and the limitations have to be seriously addressed, both in global perspective as in the case-by-case perspective. And I hope the next presenters will clearly show us this.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for this very interesting presentation. A lot of information. I think it's well covering the different steps of how did we go to this, and how we are working as conformity assessment bodies and accreditation bodies in a network. So it's not separate parties. We are all together under the same umbrella and supporting each other. And I think now this is making also a challenge for us, and an exam also for our procedures that we did put before. Did they survive or not this exam? And one of those procedures will be really the decision making. So we know that most of the organizations in conformity assessment and also accreditation, we take some decisions, and that has a very strict procedures, ballots, and then commands, and then ballots, and then also you have quorums and things like that. And it can take months sometimes for international organizations, but also at the level of conformity assessment, when you have also decisions to make. How did this work under the COVID-19, when you cannot have the meetings of these committees, you cannot have everyone in the same room, and decisions needed to be taken and fast? Do you think that this was something that was covered? Because in the response that we had today, most of the people say that the response was okay, but did the decision get to the level of this response?
Yeah, thank you, Rahim. It's an interesting question, and I have mixed feelings on this. Quick decisions were in fact needed. And the traditional physical meetings, as you mentioned, were not possible. So we had to rely also on ICT and on people's commitment to perform some of the activities and the core processes and decisions we have to do. General assemblies, committee meetings, task force work groups, and work groups were supported by web conferencing. Peer assessments were conducted using the new tools. New tools was also used for voting, for instance, for voting purposes. Trust and bonding amongst different stakeholders had to be achieved in short periods of time as well. This was adequate in many situations, as I mentioned, and definitely for the decision-making process for certification services and for conformity assessment services, this was achieved quite comprehensively. But it's very difficult to achieve in other activities, such as progressing on debating strategic imperatives and drivers. When on managing board election process, for instance, processes, when establishing new partnerships, some of these activities were actually delayed due to the pandemic, and we'll have to address them in a later status. But in general, maybe big organizations were already more experienced in using such tools, whether many small organizations were required to adapt in a very short learning curve. But in general senses, I believe we succeed in making our core decisions.
Very good. I see some other questions also about if there's any guidances that have been established by the different organizations, the cooperation between the different organizations. And Pedro, I think, my point of view, I think this is momentum when all the world is under the same pressure and same challenge. So I think it's more a momentum of cooperation now. So did this cooperation work? Was there more cooperation during this period? Did the old MOUs and agreements work towards a better COVID-19 response? Or was everyone just concentrated on what he's doing and there was no support on that? So what is your witnessing about this?
Yeah, definitely. Again, a unique momentum of cooperation was boosted by the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. Don't take me wrong, we have been cooperating with success in the past, and IAF and CASCO are great examples of that, okay? However, we had to address the challenges that were placed by the pandemic outbreak in a very short period of time. And that could only be achieved through commitment and cooperation. Since things happen so fast and decisions have to be made in very short periods of time, to ensure that only cooperation would be possible, only with true cooperation would be possible to ensure an adequate and valuable outcome for all. It is impressive, for instance, to witness the willingness of accreditation bodies to work with certification bodies and to work with completely available to work with conformity assessment bodies. We noticed other industry efforts like the one in Jeff that I mentioned in the food safety. For the first time, we were able to address them directly. The CAB community was able to address them directly and make a contribution for the improvement of the certification and of the audits. These are mere examples, but surely relevant to give us confidence for the future. Surely cooperation is one of the best things that we can take out of this context.
So I think that from your presentation and that the nice answer you gave us now, I think that the cooperation that existed and the infrastructure that were built now for 40 years for different multilateral agreements, international accreditation corporations, that was one of the atouts, or one of the strong things that we had to fight COVID-19, without which we would have never been able to go so far. I think this was very important. But also a lesson that I think we take from this is that we need to cooperate more, maybe in some things that we did not know before, and maybe especially in forecasting what can happen in the future, what are the new fields of activity that are going to come, and also knowing the limitations and the obstacles that can face us, because sometimes we have, as this time, we have to react very fast and be in response to the supply chains not stopping, for the certificates to be extended very fast, and for people not stopping the work and trade to be also fluent during such periods. And this links me to the next presenter. So we have Dr. Stephanie with us, with whom we're going to talk about remote activities, what are the conditions and limitations for such activities, and can we really do this activity very confident, or should we make sure about some of those limitations that can stop our work? So Stephanie is very famous, Dr. Stephanie. She's the head of the STAR group, and we always refer to her as a STAR in the conformity assessment realm. She works in standardization work, essentially, and also for accreditation, conformity assessment. So she's in the ASCO committee, conformity assessment. She works there. She's also an expert in different working groups. We've known her recently, especially for the new 17029. So she was the convener of the working group on the validation verification new standard. And that's something that needed a lot of innovation and also open mind that Stephanie has. There's also, she works with us also for many working groups in accreditation and ISO-CASCO also when we participate in 1725, the new 1721-1, the 17011 also, that the revision in 2017, and also 17030. So you can see that she's working in many of those standards, and she has that view about the terminology, the application of the standards, and how they are on the implementation phase also. She's also a member of the Chairman's Policy and Coordination Group for ISO, so the CPC. As we said, she's the convener of the STAR, and also she's the member of the Technical Interface Group, the TIG, for ISO. She has also some criteria follow up with the different organizations at the regional level. So like for SEN and SENELEC, she works on the criteria for conformity assessment bodies. She's the chair-elect now. Congratulations for that. We have also for DIN, she works in Germany, as you have seen from her name. So she's from Germany. She works with DIN, expert in various policy committees and working groups for conformity assessment. And also in accreditation, so she participates in ILAC and AF and different regional organizations too. So I will give the floor to Stephanie, so she can give us some information about this new phenomenon that we are using, the remote activities. It was there before, but now it's like the main way that we are using our work for conformity assessment and for accreditation. And let's see what conditions and limitations are for that. The floor is yours, Stephanie.
Thank you, Brahim. Lina, Pedro, it's a pleasure to do that with you. Nasreen, thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to contribute to this ISO and UNIDO event. And thanks to you, dear virtual audience, for dialing in, for listening remotely, a subject on which I would like to share some thoughts with you. The reasons for us for not being at the site at which we are supposed to be are evident. Currently, they are serious, they're urgent. There may be more, there may be others, there may be some persisting for us to do what we do, not at the site, but remotely. Things such as any sort of exchange, interview, meeting, question and answer situations conducted by information and communication technologies. We're making use of imaging instead of having a look at the object itself. We're making use of someone who happens to be on site and could perhaps perform things on our behalf as a proxy. For all of this, we might find that the timeline would need some adaptations with regard to the established choreography. You find that an audit, for instance, might be chopped down to more than one and shorter sessions, which are more effective than the usual one-day on-site visit and do everything in one room in one go. When things need to be exchanged and sent over, obviously that takes also a moment. The most important thing is that whatever is done differently and whatever is done instead of the usual procedures needs to be backed up by those who set the requirements for these procedures. So it's not automatically given that certain activities can be complemented or even substituted by remote activities. That needs to be at least communicated, at least thought after, mostly negotiated with those who set the requirements, the public authorities, scheme owners, and the clients. Even if permission is granted, any activity would require very thorough evaluation of the imminent risks. And these are the usual risks which might appear in a different light. The risk to the impartiality of the conformity assessor. So if someone pulls the samples instead of me, I would need to know whether that someone has perhaps some particular interests in mind that could inflict on the impartiality I conduct my conformity assessment activities with. The risk to do what I have to do properly is also to be considered, and perhaps the most prominent and evident, the risk to miss a non-conformity because I do something remotely and because I'm not on site. The risk that I misjudge a non-conformity, and that has to be challenged with the potential effect of a non-conformity that has been missed or misjudged. So in case the effect is something I could not live with, I would need extra caution that no conformity slips my attention, or perhaps may decide that a remote approach is not appropriate. Similar to the timeline, you might find that an extra rigor is needed with regard to documenting, recording, repetition, gathering more data. You might find that you repeat what you have understood in a virtual meeting because you do not read the body language as you would in the same room. And you might want to back up what you do instead of being on site. You might want to have more images in case you don't have a look at the object itself. So that needs also to be taken into account when backing up the imminent risks of remote activities. With all that given, however, remote activities could very well contribute to continued assessment and assurance of conformity, thereby contribute to continued confidence in the assessed and conforming objects, and supporting the legal frameworks in place, the operated programs, and the marketplace in general. Obviously, the key feature, as we all experience right now, are electronic tools, so you need to have them. They need to be functional, and you would need people competent and skilled to operate them. You may find that when everything is less centralized, that the communication cascades need some adaptation, the reporting lines perhaps. Perhaps you need stronger connections, perhaps things are easier in case an interview is recorded. You wouldn't need to wrap it up for your supervisor, but that information cascade needs also some consideration. With all that, in a nutshell, you would need protocols, or you would need robust adaptations of established protocols, and you would need the right people familiar with, competent and skilled to apply these protocols. On the other hand, even if you take care of all of that has been said, and even if you appreciate the benefits, you'll find that there are things that are not easy to be done from afar. They are objects that would require physical examination, that would require a person to lay his or her hands on. Also, it's very difficult to enter new areas without at least making a small step on that new ground. But for the example of auditing management systems, we had quite some encouraging experiences with remote approaches to the auditing and document citing phases and processes. However, clients and organizations with very complex, very extensive, very high risk activities, businesses or scopes are rather difficult or perhaps even impossible to assess from afar. Also, grasping the atmosphere, everything that relates to reading body language, observing, experiencing group dynamic, getting an impression whether a person seems to be at ease and in routine with the procedure they apply, or whether there's any pressure to be sensed. All that sort of personal impression and sensing the temperature in the room might be missed when auditing remotely. Less subjective, more objective, and nevertheless even more important are the evidence themselves. So it might be difficult to judge whether it's a copy or original that is held to the camera, and even if you can be sure that it's the original, there might be some handwritten note on the back of that document you miss, and that handwritten note on the other hand indicates that it is in fact a controlled document and indicates the version control, and you would just miss it because you weren't looking at the document yourself. And the last aspect I would like to mention is that channel, that conduct through which everything that needs to be either passed along itself or transmitted or represented from the site at which it takes place or at which it's situated to the remote conformity assessor, that channel needs to be a good one. It needs to be safe, it needs to be secure, it needs to be stable, it needs to maintain confidentiality, it needs to respect the legal provisions in place, and with data protection and privacy, usually there are legal provisions. And that is a very crucial part when considering to do something somewhere else than the site at which it is done usually or regularly, and that has to be taken care of. So in summary, I would say it's feasible. It's not always permitted or possible. It's not always a good idea, but it could be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I think this reflects also the other side of the remote activity. It's a good tool. It saved a lot of businesses work and also a lot of procedures that needed to be applied during this period. It helped the world continue and the human race to continue its trade and its work during this period. But also there are some limitations to that. We need to make sure. We cannot also generalize to say that remote activity is good for everything. So as I see from many of the questions here, they say we need guidance. Some of these activities we cannot do it. We cannot trust the remote activity as an effective tool to make conformity. There are also some questions asking start, how can I make sure I'm still in conformity with ISO standards, and will not the accreditation body come to me and put no conformity, and those kind of questions, and also do the regulators go with that remote activity? So I think it's important also some of the questions they say, will this become part of the ISO requirements? Is the remote already something in ISO that is possible to do? And as it's, for example, for 19011, that allows that to be done partially or fully. And will we see something on remote assessment, remote audit, remote activities, remote testing, remote inspection in ISO standards?
Well, that's a good question. How would I know? I could expect that we put more of our understanding we are all gathering at this very time into standards. I made it very short when I said, all in all, you need protocols, and that's what you need. Perhaps you would even need more than protocols. Perhaps you would need regulated, standardized, specified limitations, like you can do that, but not for the first time you're visiting a client, or you can do that, but not once the installation is fully in operation. So that brings me to the question, whenever you put specifications around it, whenever you put limitations or even red flags in front of it, you would need to know what are you talking about. And you would find that the concept remote might differ from person to person, from sector to sector, from application to application, from region to region, from I don't know what to provide here as an example. So if I'm, as an auditor, find myself at the headquarters of an organization and I call in the other sides of that organization, is that a remote audit? I'm on site, but not on all of the sites. If an inspector, instead of climbing a crane, sends a drone with a camera, is that remote or not? Usually that inspector would climb the crane, but at that very moment, at least him or her are situated near the crane. It's just that the eyes are
with the drone
remote. So I expect some perhaps definitions, or let's say concept specifications of what it is, and perhaps not in standards, perhaps rather in the downstream specifications of those who apply or require these methodologies. But I expect some of our experiences now to be generalized and to be cast into standardized texts. Yes, I would.
Yeah, I see that many now in the chat, everyone is writing a lot of discussions here. They agree with you. They say that's true. There's a lot of limitations that make us be careful. And so maybe is it going to overwhelm also the merits of the remote assessment? Most of the people agree that we need to have protocols and that we must have these things put in place. But my question also is that even if we have protocols on how remote assessment is done, there's that human aspect that still is missing. So when you are inside of the room and you have your 70% of what you say is with your body language. So if that's not there and just people can see this screen and then you don't feel the other person who is inside of the camera, you cannot see the environment, you cannot also, some people said here, we cannot make a tour of the premises because that's not possible. Otherwise we have virtual reality in the future. So this human aspect that we also train our assessors and our auditors on. One part of being a lead assessor or lead auditor is to know how to manage people, how to talk in a place, how to be able to also verbally talk, but also unverbally transmit messages. Don't you think that thing will always be missing?
Yes, I think a great deal of that will be lost in transmission. I'm afraid that's the only. There's one other situation I was made known of, is the smell in inspection of food processing. That was for many of the situations we were discussing right now, with severe backup and super extra wearing suspenders and the belt and increasing rigor and stringency and so on. For many situations, we could find a solution, but for that sensual experience on site, that person to person, that what I called earlier, the temperature in the room, and you'll find the requirements regarding the competence of auditors astonishingly social skills based in the 17021 Part 1 standard. Obviously they need technical knowledge, obviously they need some tricks and things to do, but there's a great deal of cultural and social and personal attitude, and that can, with some experience, and we are all on training here, be mediated somehow, because you adapt a particular online behavior and online ways of expressing yourself perhaps, but a great deal of that part I cannot imagine to be replaced by information and communication technology.
Totally understandable. I think one strong thing for human race is that we are adaptable. So it was very astonishing how we did adapt to this technology and how to go to it. So I think maybe we can adapt in the future, have maybe stronger technology that can have you see everything around you. But until then, that part I think is still missing in this. Thank you, Stephanie. That was very interesting. Just because I see a lot of questions coming, and then some of these questions also, they have answers in the IAF FAQ. So if you go to the website IAF FAQ, so frequently asked the questions, iafaqq.com. So you can go there, and I will write it also in the messages. You can go there and find a lot of these answers to the questions like, can we make a partial remote assessment audit? Can we make a full audit remotely? Is it possible to cover validation and verification? The witnessing cannot also be done remotely. All these questions, so that you have asked here, you can have those answers to them in IFFQ, and also we'll select some in the end of this webinar to answer to you. And from Stephanie now, we can understand that remote activities is something that is important. It can have its limitations, and also it can affect the way we can judge about the competence of the client or the entity to be certified, or the judgment about the sample that we are testing and or the machine we are inspecting, etc. And then comes the accreditation bodies who are going to accredit the certifiers. How do accreditation bodies relate to this? So do they allow this or not? How do they also themselves change the way they make their assessments to go to that realm of a new virtual world and make the accreditation? And here I think the best to answer this will be Lina Khuda. She's one of our best experts in the field of accreditation. So Lina is a master's degree in quality management. She has also a BSc degree in industrial engineering. She has around 25 years of experience in establishing, monitoring, and implementing and maintaining management systems generally. She has the two sides. She has also the side where she worked in accreditation bodies. She was the former director of Dubai Accreditation Center, which is now called the AIAC, the Emirates International Accreditation Center. And also she worked in the conformity assessment, consultancy, training, etc. So she knows also very well the part, especially the labs and the inspection part. She works very well in that period. Also, she worked with a standardization organization in Jordan. So she has also that aspect of standardization people, which was also a specific set of mind for standardization people, how they look to things and also conceptualize aspects. And I think Lina will help us very well to know about this information and how we can, as accreditation bodies, cooperate with this, and what give us her witnessing of this period and how accreditation bodies did react and be helpful, not only for conformity assessment bodies, but also for the trade, the regulators, and also ultimately the final user. So Lina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I'd like also to thank Stephanie and Pedro for their interesting presentations. Thank you, Nisreen, for this kind invitation. And I would like to thank the very enthusiastic and motivated audience, the virtual audience. We're seeing your chats and interesting questions and intervention. Thank you so much for being with us today. So I'll be talking about the accreditation in the virtual world. As you heard my colleagues already, this is not new. The remote activities and the virtual work is all not new. So we would just have to adapt again because of this COVID-19 outbreak. We have to cope up and to ensure that remote activities or actually the conformity assessment accreditation activities are still providing assurance to the users of them. So remote assessment was mentioned in the international standards. Luckily for us in the accreditation community is that we have the background support from ISO 17011 addressing remote assessment, and also ILAC and IF, they were also ready prior to that also for preparation of policies and procedures and putting conditions and limitations for the use of remote assessment. Probably because this is, we were just forced to jump into these implementation of these remote assessments due to the COVID-19. Probably we still have some work to do, but we must acknowledge that it has been there before, and we are now in this one. In the scene itself. So how much different are remote assessments? Well, actually the structure of the assessment so far, according to the experiences we've made as accreditation bodies and accreditation community, are still following the typical assessment cycle, but probably now doing it is much different. And you've heard already from my colleagues how planning and preparation is really different. You need to do like a test of the scene before you do it actually, since you're not there physically. So you need to test the platforms you're going to use. You need to test the capability of assessors of using all of these. You need also, on top of that, the accreditation body should have done like risk assessment when selecting the priorities for the assessments to be carried out according to the existing program. Also the conduct, I think that another greatest part that has differed is the conduct, because now during the previous 3 months, we were fully conducting the assessments remotely. I mean, probably we've done parts of remote assessments before COVID-19, I mean, but now we are just relying 100% on that. So when I talk remotely about remote activities, I'm talking about the assessors or the AB's point of view, because the CAPs are obviously still working, even if not in full capacity. So challenges are there, and they are still there. So exchange of documents, for example, and records. So luckily we have adopted strategies where the videos of the key operations or processes are pre-recorded, where they can be shared with the assessors before the assessment. That can save a little bit of time and give some impression about the operations when they are being assessed remotely. And of course, the biggest challenge is the witnessing activities. Think about all different types of conformity assessment activities: testing, calibration, inspection, yeah, so product certification. So most of these activities are very difficult to be assessed remotely. So we have to think about tools to do that. So it could be done at real time, it could be recorded, it could be just interviews with key personnel. And also another challenging aspect is the adaptability and the capability of assessors. So obviously now we don't have the luxury of responding to emails after like next day, or so you have to have instant tools to respond and communicate and make use of all the information you get. Also reporting is no longer traditional, so we had to do lots of virtual meeting among the assessment team members and also with the CAPs in order to deliver the discussions, and these discussions could take several meetings until the message is conveyed properly, because you've heard also body language is being lost in such meetings, in such communication. and the follow-up activities, so mostly post-assessment activities will so far remain the same, because anyway they have been done remotely even before the introduction of remote assessment. So ABs, they had lots of homework to do, although most of you maybe answered that there are still a lot of things to be done. But I assure you also that accreditation bodies are working very hard day and night. We're working from homes, we're working from, so all through the day, just to make sure that we are adapting properly, training ourselves. Everybody's learning. This is a learning process. So lots of already online assessors training and webinars have been carried out. And luckily, these are all recorded, so it can be shared across the globe. So even if it's done in one region, other regions can benefit of that. So because some regions, they have maybe were faster because of this outbreak of the COVID was there. And in their part, and then the knowledge transfer is very important. You heard Pedro insisted on the cooperation, collaboration. So this is very important, knowledge transfer. We have to transfer knowledge among ourselves. Luckily, also ABs are coaching in virtual teams. So we keep doing regular meetings to give advice, and they are also providing ICT infrastructure support. It's very important that there is a reliable platform for exchange of information. It has to be licensed. It has to be ensuring the security of the information there. So ICT infrastructure and softwares from the AB side, were also a mean of preparing the assessor. Feedback. So feedback, we're collecting feedback, oral feedback, written feedback after each stage of assessment or a certain group of assessment, so that actions or corrective actions will be taken, or maybe improvement actions. Also, very good thing that has been done by many accreditation bodies, that they were involving their assessors and accreditation body staff in preparation of the policies and procedures in remote assessment. These are all new to us, so we need to collect as much information as possible, taking views of those who are experiencing different types of conformity assessment bodies. And of course, the sharing of the lessons learned. So we have experienced, many of us, I think, we have experienced breakdown in the internet, or we have faced some, let's say fraud in records, something like that. So all the lessons, these is very important to be shared so that we can learn from these. And most of the questions we get from CABs are very useful, and they are normally published on the frequently asked questions on the websites of accreditation bodies in order to guide CABs to them when they are doing. So how do we do remote assessment? And to be honest with you, and when we plan in accreditation bodies plan for assessments, we usually think about all the different risks that could be faced when we do or use certain technique over another. We think about the complexity of the processes. We think about the history of the CAB. We think about so many different things. So for me, for example, I put a strategy for each CAB I go to assess, and I am sure many of the assessors are doing the same. And it's very important that assessors also themselves, at the planning stage, they have to talk to each other and they have to agree on the most appropriate strategy. And also they have to think about the capability of the CAB. We all agree that it happened so fast, that this lockdown, and many of the CABs, maybe they didn't have the chance to be ready. They didn't have the ICT structure. So we have to think about each case individually. So typically documents and record reviews is straightforward, but most of the CABs, maybe they don't have electronic copies. So you have to think about alternatives. Videos could be a good solution. And then when you think about uploading big sizes of documents versus sending by emails, we have to think about reliable portals. So also the witnessing of live streams is a very good way of doing that, but you've heard Stephanie, it's not always possible, it's not applicable to all CABs, so there will be some restrictions and challenges to the witnessing live stream videos of certain conformity assessment activities. Interviewing is a very good solution because nowadays, luckily, we all are familiar of how to use so many different platforms of making virtual meetings, online meetings, discussing, asking questions, getting answers. And you may also send some questions beforehand so that they will be ready with these. And of course, the audio communication application are also available. Vertical records is very important because also you need to make sure that you are getting the right records that you are asking for, not what they prepare for you, because it's very difficult also to ensure that they give you the genuine or the original records that you're looking for. So it's vertical records, we may start by asking them, giving you certain list, and then you will do during the conduct, select from these lists and then go vertically so that to make sure that there is a system in place and it's working and they have supporting evidences for that. Well, software interface is a very good solution if both sides, the CAB and the AB, is ready with that. So they may interface when there is an automated activity so that the assessors can get information from that. And of course, nowadays, phone and email communication is becoming a very traditional or are becoming very traditional means of communication, but they're still working because sometimes Wi-Fi may stop, the ICT technology might fail you. So you will find always an alternative with a phone. Messages now is becoming very popular, especially WhatsApp messages for certain parts of the world. So audio and video messages also through WhatsApp it is a good solution. Yeah, so all of these, and maybe you can think about more, but I mean, mainly these were all communication that we have used, or many accreditation bodies have used so far in their conduct of the assessment. So let's look at the bright side. Again, I'm with the opinion of all of my previous speakers, and I am also coming from a point of view of an accreditation body where we are a little bit conservative and we would like to be on top of everything. But again, there are good opportunities. There is a bright side out of it, and it's proven that we could continue our activities even with that outbreak. So for accreditation bodies, safety is the main, of course, reason for doing that. So, of course, as applicable, because sometimes you do remote assessment, not because of infection or because of any disease spread or something like that, but due to any other logistical problems. So safety is one of the bright things that you have to think about it, and think about the continuity of the business, continuity of the assessment programs. Many of the conformity assessment bodies, when the lockdown happened, they were their certificates were about to expire, and they are in a very vital fields, and they are very active. So that ensured that continuity of the assessment programs will be there with the remote assessments, and of course compliance with the international standards. I mean, ABs for them also, they are under MRAs, MLAs, so they don't want to lose this one. So they have to continue doing the work as it's supposed to be. They don't have to miss the due assessment dates. Flexible schedule, less stressful. I would say maybe less stressful in terms of that we can do it over like more than what a normal or on-site assessment would take. So it could go 3 or 4 days instead of 1 day. It will improve the efficiency and it will reduce the bureaucracy. So we have seen it happening because lots of things could be exchanged instantly. So lots of the activities that used to be written in paper and approved and sent over were reduced. So definitely if it's going to be implemented on a larger scale, it's going to be improving efficiency and reducing bureaucracy. And it's going to ensure consistency. It's going to happen. Probably now we're not well equipped with very good softwares and databases, but probably in the future, this is going to ensure consistency in the application among assessors. Complementing on-site assessment, I must stress, of course, that this cannot replace on-site assessments, but we have to think about once things are better, once we're back to normal life, hopefully very soon, we have to think about the criteria when we will do remote assessment, when we will do on-site assessment. And the best solution would be to mix between both of them in order to ensure the compliance and the competence of the CAPs. And of course, its potential for new accreditation fields. And I think many accreditation bodies, they have already received accreditation applications in different ICT fields and fields related to the virus and in the medical industry. So lots of opportunities will be emerging and have already emerged for some accreditation bodies. For CAPs too, because the CAPs themselves also will ensure the safety of their people, and it's going to be cost effective. I've heard it lots of time now from many CAPs that we're saving a lot by not having assessors on site, because we will be saving the cost of their accommodation, the cost of their travel flight tickets and things like that. So it is cost effective for most CAPs, and it's maintaining at the same time beneficial for them because they can maintain their accreditation status if the accreditation body is carried on with their assessment schedule. And then the compliance with the international standards. Obviously, most CAPs who are interested and under the umbrella of the ABs are accredited CAPs. So this accredited CAP is very important for them to comply with the international standard and maintain that. Of course, faster accreditation process, again, due to the advancement in technology and processing of the different stages, and rewarding to CAPs with proven histories, of course, simple scopes and full automation. Again, because this is not applicable to all CAPs, you can't do remote assessment for all types of scopes. But for those with proven histories, they can get the privilege of being remotely assessed without having to go that. Of course, provided that they will have some kind of risk assessment and get it approved by accreditors. And of course, with simple scope and full automation. Improving the competitiveness, of course, if they maintain the accreditation status, if they were getting their accreditation faster than others, if they have opportunities to be remotely assessed, all of this will definitely improve their competitiveness over their peers. And of course, we can acknowledge that it's a wider spectrum of opportunities for many CAPs if they think about the positive side. Well, before I conclude the session, I just would like to tell you that we have to be realistic. I mean, this wind is coming, no way. So we have witnessed 3 difficult months from both sides, CAPs and ABs. And we managed, I can proudly say that we managed to do not maybe 100% of what we were planning to, but we've done a lot of good work. And some of us maybe will look at the whole situation from a pessimistic point of view, and they will just keep complaining. It's not going to happen. The body language is not going to help us doing it properly. I think the lots of effort being done will keep us away from that one. And some of them, they will be optimistic maybe, and they will just say, let's freeze this until the pandemic is over, and then we will do the assessment on site. But I would like to invite you to be realistic and to, of course, just adjust the sail, taking all limitations into consideration. Thank you so much for...
Thank you very much, Lena. I think this is very instructive to see how the accreditation bodies also are reacting to this. I think they have a duty to support also the conformity and assessment infrastructure, regulators, and also the MLA and MRA agreements. They should be also helping and supporting, as they expected to do, the trade between the different countries and also protection of users. I've seen that many of the questions, we have many questions coming, and that showed the interest. But one of the questions that was interesting for me, I think Laurent Cambrou and others also, they have the same, is about how regulators and also accreditation bodies accept the remote. Because if the regulator says, no, I want it on site, and they don't change the regulation, or if accreditation body says, no, it's 50% on site, and it should be only the rest can be remote. At that time, it's difficult, even if the tool is good and we can use it, it's difficult to go through it. And this is many of the questions that I've seen here. So how is the accreditation bodies community reacting to this? How ILAC and AF is reacting to this? Taking in mind that we have only some minutes left in this webinar.
Yeah. So yes, as I told you, maybe at the beginning of the spread or the outbreak of the COVID-19, it was not really, we couldn't imagine that this would happen. So so we had, like Pedro mentioned, we have to balance between the risk of not doing that at all or doing that and taking some risks. So, and then eventually we had to do lots of meeting and discussion with stakeholders, and we started with the surveillance and with the reassessment. Now, I can tell you that maybe in future we'll be looking at also new scopes, but again, we have to make advantage of the lessons learned, and we have to take into consideration limitations available. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's also something very interesting, that we can have our accreditation bodies and our regulators be more reactive also for the next pandemic, God forbids if it comes, or other thing that comes in the future, which we call as extraordinary events in IF.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll be ready for those. Another question very fast for you, Lena, because it's like one of the questions. Did the accreditation body take consideration the fact that professional testing providers, they cannot send samples, calibration services are not there, and those things that are required by accreditation, but CABs, what they can do, that's not available in 1 minute.
Yeah, well, again, risk assessment. So we had to ask for risk assessment, and we had to ask them also for making some alternatives, how to ensure that the equipment are working well in spite of the due date of the calibration has reached. And of course, lots of them, they have done lots of technical evaluation of the performance, and they've used their reference, standard reference materials, and they were showing to the auditors. And we freeze some of the equipment, to be honest, and we freeze some of the tests under the accreditation scope until such a time when we gain assurance that this will be reinstated.
Thank you very much. I think accreditation bodies, they have that duty to be also flexible during this period and make sure that even though the competence is there, but not having additional...
of course, not to jeopardize,
Yeah, so it's all have to be risk-based approach. So Pedro, this in the beginning, he said the genie is out of the bottle. So it's like now we are starting to make the remote assessment, remote audits, remote activities everywhere, covering, as Stephanie said, not only the part where we make the determination part, but also the sampling and also the decision in the end, so all of that. So I would like to ask Stephanie, is the genie going back to the bottle after this, or are we going to have some of him still outside with this remote activities?
I think some of it will stay outside. I haven't come across a genie who ever was willing to go back to the bottle. So as a nature of law, as a nature of the law of nature, that way around, I would say some of these effects will persist, and it will very much depend on us, on all of us. You mentioned the stakeholders and the cooperation and joining forces earlier. If we manage to learn from the best experience and put some red lines around what really didn't prove to work out, the genie perhaps does not need to go back to the bottle.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Thank you for everyone. We have around 151 people on Facebook, 500 here. And I think this is very good that we've been able to discuss with all of you. Thank you all for the questions you have asked. As Mr. Dean said, the video will be available for you and to see it and also to rewatch it again. It's also on the Facebook page, so you can go to that Facebook and so see the video. Many of those questions that I said, you can have answers to them from IFFQ, but also you can contact accreditation bodies and assessment bodies in your country and IF and ILAC to more answers for that. And it was my pleasure to be in this short webinar. We all would have liked to stay more and talk more, but we agreed on 1 hour and a half. So I just go back now to Nisreen and thank her, ISO and UNIDO for supporting and having this webinar of interest. We look forward for more webinars, and I give the last word for you, Nisreen.
Yes, Thank you very much. Thank you, Brahim, and thank you for the speakers. And I think it was really interesting. We can see from the number of the participants and the number of questions we're receiving. I'm sorry we have not been able to answer your question, but we are going to consider this to look at what other webinars we can coordinate in this area. So thank you very much for our participants, and I would like to thank you, UNIDO, our strategic partner, who are always supporting us in the delivery of our capacity building activity for our members in developing country. Thank you, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Officially closed.
Yeah.
Done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.